questions of Teresa? Amy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The email that I have for Travis County, if it helps, is that the correct carryover amount is $302,255 for federal and $85,112 in-kind match. That was the email from Kathy that I have from earlier today.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this topic? All right, is there a motion to approve? Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Motion by Mayor Schrader, second by Councilmember Mateo. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. We are going to do a little bit out of order. We're going to go on to item number 9 before we get to 7 and 8. So this is an update on our 2050 plan.
Thank you. This is this information item serves as an update on the development of the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan, also known as the RTP. Previous updates to the board have included several months ago a discussion of the purpose and timeline of the plan. And then just last month we discussed the project call process and some of the projects we received at the end of that project call, as well as the a little bit about the public outreach strategy that we're going to pursue in the fall. And that's one thing that we are going to talk a little bit more about today, the specific information that we're going to be bringing out to the public in just a few weeks. Before I pass it over to Doyce to talk about that process, or the public outreach process, I'm going to just go through the schedule for the RTP for this, the rest of this year and into next year. So, at the October this board meeting, we're going to be talking about public outreach. But starting in a few weeks, we will begin the first round of public outreach meetings. Later in October, we'll be bringing an information update to the TAC on the draft revenue estimates we've developed for the fiscal limit exercise. Then in December of this year, we'll be presenting that information to the board, as well as an update on the project list development for the RTP. And that's all going to culminate in a draft plan document for the end of this year. And then starting next year in January and February, we'll bring that draft plan for information to both the TAC and the board. We will have a second round of public outreach in the in the winter through early spring of next year, and then follow that up with a final plan presented for information to the TAC and the board in March and April respectively, followed by a recommendation by the TAC in April of next year on the final plan, and taking the final plan to the policy board for action in May 2025. With that, I'll pass things over to Doyce to talk about some of the public outreach materials.
Thank you, Will. So as a reminder, the information that's in the public participation plan, the PPP, as it requires the outreach for the regional transportation plan, the RTP. This is the guidance that is listed in the PPP. So as Will mentioned, we will have 2 rounds of public outreach and public comment. So that first round will actually start today. After this meeting, we will open the online open house and then also have in-person events in each of the 6 counties, which I'll get to in just a moment. The second round of outreach will be next spring. As I mentioned, we'll be using online open houses, in person, and then something that we started with the 2045 plan in 2020. We started mail-in comments and also being able to deliver information by mail so that people could send in surveys and public comments using a postage paid envelope. So that's a remote option that we're continuing to use, as well as being available by phone if people have questions or want to be able to request material by mail and even leave comments by voicemail. So as I mentioned, we will have public meetings in all 6 of the counties, both for this first round of outreach as well as next spring. The public hearing for the RTP, this board will hold that next spring prior to adoption. So all of the public comments we receive from both rounds of outreach will be given to you before your discussion next spring.
Doyce, can I have one question?
Sure.
You mentioned who's paying for the envelopes too? I mean, this is interesting that we're doing every sort of method, but you're reaching to folks with it. Is that us providing the
Yes.
self-stamped? Okay.
Yes, it's part of the contract we have with our public involvement consultants for the RTP.
Okay. I just want to make sure, reiterate this, that every venue and possible ability to give feedback is being made. So when they do go back and look at this part of the video, they understand that. Because oftentimes we keep hearing over and over from people who are saying, my voice isn't being heard. You're not allowing for us to
Actually,
talk
yours
about these
probably
things.
isn't. Turn your microphone on.
Is it?
Put the button up.
Oh.
Bueller? Bueller? Okay. Yeah. Luckily, when they go back to the video, they'll be like, what is this guy talking about? But again, I love that you're showing all the different avenues by which we're trying to reach out to people, because we hear that as electeds over and over again, particularly when it's come to this process. And so that's great and very much appreciated.
Okay, that's good to hear. So this is a little bit of the overview we'll be providing to the public. The RTP and the planning processes that we use are not necessarily intuitive to the general public. So we do like this graphic that shows kind of the life cycle of the planning process that we use. That the plans begin at the local and regional level with those plans and studies that are done in partnership with the jurisdictions in CAMPO. And you'll see the We Are Here box. This is the regional long-range plan at step number 2. Step number 3 is what we typically think of as the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP, with that project selection and funding before projects are implemented, either going to construction or starting a study process. The other information that we're giving to the public is the need for the RTP and looking out 25 years in advance. I mean, all of us know that the region is growing at just an immense rate. So it's kind of hard to comprehend some of these numbers and how quickly each of the 6 counties are growing, both in population and employment. So this is the information we'll be providing. And just so you know, we have gone through the population and employment growth with the local jurisdictions as well as the TAC. This has been a discussion at several TAC meetings, and so the local jurisdictions and also the staff that represent the TAC have seen these numbers. The fall outreach events, these are, it's actually 7 of the events we'll be holding for both the RTP. We're going to be having amendments for the TIP open as well today, and then the Regional Safety Action Plan. So we'll be having 3 different plans and programs available for the public to see at these in-person events. So we'll be having 1 in each county, and we're very thankful for the city of Manor, Georgetown, Marble Falls, and Kyle, as well as Lockhart, who's hosting us at some of their city events. There are a lot of fall festivals happening, and we knew that would be a good way to reach the public where they are. So we're able to make it to these events and have that information. For Manor Night Out, I do want to just point out Travis County is working on their own safety action plan, so we've invited Travis County to be part of our tabling for the Manor Night Out so that Travis County can also have their regional or their safety action plan information with the information we'll be providing for the other 5 counties.
I'm going to put Bastrop on my calendar, Heroes and Hot Rods.
Yes, it is. It's a car show over a Veterans Day weekend.
That sounds fun.
And then this is just a short video. We've put together about 3 short videos to explain kind of the multimodal aspects of the RTP, what the RTP is. Again, this isn't something that's necessarily intuitive for everybody. So this is just a quick video so you can get an idea of some of the information that we'll be providing to the public. I think Will and I will answer any questions y'all may have.
Does anybody have any questions of staff at this point? Okay, seeing none. Thank y'all very much for the update. So we will go back now to item number 7. Well, I'm not sure what, on the original agenda, it's item number 7, but we reordered it because we knew we were going to. So it's 8 up here, but it's 7 on the original agenda. All right, I think we've got Mr. Kaufman.
Good afternoon, y'all. Thank you.
Howdy.
Thank you for having me. I was,
I got what
hoping
you
that, I felt like we could have possibly skipped both of these presentations today because, well, I solved the Wordle in 2 guesses.
Oh, wow. Good for you.
And I think with that, do you have any questions? I mean, I think there's really nothing else to say today. But since I'm here, I'm going to be talking about congestion management process and traffic safety in the region. So I guess if y'all are patrolling the slide deck, appreciate it. Back in 2020, we put together something called the congestion management process. This is a federally required process for MPOs to conduct. And what it does is it basically is set to monitor congestion in your region and also look at different strategies for addressing congestion and try to find ways, ideally other than adding capacity, to try to address it. So in 2020, this was right before COVID, you all adopted it. It was included in I believe the 2045 long-range plan. And this document, what it did was it identified a network that is being monitored. It set forth a series of measures that are being data are being collected and information is being monitored over time. The reporting of these metrics, looking and identifying various mitigation strategies, and also ideally looking at before and after studies of projects that you all have implemented to see how these projects, specifically those that are identified in this document, how they actually performed. Next slide. So the first thing that we did was we established the network. And what this network is it's just a representation of the transportation network. It is not every single road. Nobody does every single road. It would be very challenging to manage and measure. But we tried to put something together that was pretty representative of key roads in the area, but we actually got this down to basically roads that there are at least 5,000 vehicles a day traveling it. And we're looking at roads that have significance, even small roads that, a 5,000 per day road in Travis County might mean nothing compared to in Burnett County. So we were very careful to look at those roads, including all of them throughout the region, to get a decent representation. This network is divided into 384 segments. Last time we originally did this did not include frontage roads, but frontage roads are very important because they do carry a lot of traffic. We were able to include them for the next go-around. So next slide.
Can I ask for my own edification, why didn't they consider frontage roads previously?
It was about data availability. Right now, the issue about frontage roads, we were hoping to capture them earlier because of all the businesses that are located on them, especially like in Austin, Round Rock, and throughout, especially on the major freeways. We wanted to see how traffic was impacting them. But for some reason, the data set that was available to us, it just didn't have that data. But approximately 3-4 years ago, they started including it, so we're now able to include it. Continuing on, we are looking at identified performance measures. These are the measures that we are looking at, basically, how reliable is the roadway? What should the free flow speeds be? Like, what are they about 2 in the morning compared to how are they at 8 in the morning or at 5 in the afternoon? That shows the level of reliability of your system in specific roads. We want to see how that changes over time. We want to see what the transit availability is on those roads, what the safety record is on those roads, and we're able to identify congestion costs and emissions based on that. One thing we're going to be looking at, and this is based on some of the work done by CAMPO staff, is now that we have a semblance of a sidewalk and bicycle infrastructure inventory, we want to be able to include that into this and be able to start including that in some of the metrics. Next slide. The strategies that are addressed in the document, these haven't changed. These are, a lot of these are part of the travel demand management document. So these are the key ones that we had included. These are the projects that we are going to be looking at more closely to see how they impact performance on roads over time. We will also be looking at added capacity projects because we do want to see how these have changed the flow of traffic. But these are predominant strategies that we are looking at. Next slide.
Now, before you leave that slide,
Sure.
a number of those we're already doing. So
Yes.
we'll have measurements of real world what we're doing here versus a proposed project.
Yes, the
Yeah.
idea is that the question is, for example, you put in some type of signal priority system on a certain corridor. What was traffic like before that? What's traffic like after that? If you find that you've done it on 5 corridors and 4 of those corridors, it had no impact, well, you might want to think twice about installing that type of system on that corridor. So those are some of the reasons why we go and look at these strategies to see the before and afters, so that you know what type of technologies, what type of approaches that you should be looking at spending your money on, because continuing to do the same thing over and over again and getting a bad result is not necessarily the best use of your money. However, the ones that are successful, those are the things that you might want to consider moving forward with. And as mentioned, with that, that's what we'll be doing. We'll be doing the before and after assessment of these. So we have data beforehand, we'll have data afterwards, and we'll be looking at, how does the roadway specifically respond to these new strategies. So we're collecting data. We should be doing this every 2 years as the new data come out. We also want to give time for certain strategies to kind of get integrated into the system and for traffic to adapt to the new strategies to see how time has truly affected system performance based on your approach. Next slide. So one of the big things about what we're doing this year and in the probably the year or two to come, we have to kind of start from scratch in terms of what our baseline is. And a lot of it has to do with a data dilemma that we had. And that data dilemma stems from 2 different issues. The first one is our key data source, which is INRIX. You may have heard of the INRIX congestion dashboard. It's one of the primary sources of speed, travel time, and delay data that's being used throughout the country. It's being used in Texas for the Texas Top 100. It's being used for the urban mobility reports throughout for about 250 different metro areas throughout the country. It's being used by even the feds through the RIDIS program in the University of Maryland. This is pretty much one of the best sources of data. And one of the big issues that occurred was this data source originally came from truck fleets. They were trying to track trucks throughout time. Problem is, 1, trucks, there aren't as many trucks as there are cars, and 2, trucks tend to move slower than cars. And so what happened was about, back in 2019, they did a switch in the data, and it's now predominantly cars. And what that essentially means is that now all the cars are moving, cars are moving faster. There's more of them out there. You're getting more data points. And we were finding that over time, as you see traffic getting worse, your speeds got better, which didn't make any sense. And it was just how the data were coming in. The second issue we were trying to deal with, well, COVID. COVID messed up the data set because you had a time for a couple of years where you had free flow speeds, pretty much. It's May 2020 and it's 5 in the afternoon and you can go 80 miles per hour down 35. I couldn't do that. I think last time I did that was maybe 1993. So it's something that, these things kind of create some problems with the data. So what we had to do is reset a baseline, essentially. Last slide, please. And so what we are doing, while we are going to be doing all the things mentioned, continue to do metrics, look at projects, see how things improve, we are needing to reset the baseline from which all of this is being done. That baseline started back with 2021 data. We're in the process of putting together 2023 data. Part of that has been just received a couple weeks ago. Text.data falls into this. And so what we're doing is we've already set up a 2021 baseline report, which I believe was provided to you all. We're going to be doing a 2023. Early next year, we're going to be providing you that update. And later next year, we're going to start looking at those projects to see how things have improved based on the data that we have received. I believe that is my last slide, so with that, I'll take any questions.
Yes, Councilman.
Yes. Can you share with us or any context insight you might have regarding the integration of artificial intelligence with our transportation systems and what we're seeing? Is it showing up in the data as of yet?
I believe it's very, very early. There's a lot of talk, and this is something that, my agency, I'm with the Texas A&M Transportation Institute, over 700 employees, a huge research campus. Half the things that come out of their mouth are AI. I don't think people really even know what the AI is. There's a lot of talk, there's a lot about data transmission, the types of data that are coming in, but I don't believe that anything of note has been really established that takes advantage of that technology yet. I mean, there are still, I've seen a lot of advances. There are a lot of technologies now that can look at a car and say, that is a car. That's a good thing. Or look at a pedestrian and say, that is a pedestrian. And those technologies are slowly starting to get integrated. Partially it's a cost thing, and partially I think people are waiting to see who can test it and figure out whether it works or it does not work. But I don't believe it's proliferated into the system yet. I still think it's going to be a few years before it does.
Okay. And will the findings show it? Because I know, for example, City of Austin, we're using AI in slowing our pedestrian crossing signals. When we see if there's an elderly individual or someone who is disabled, having it slow down the timing to allow them to get from one side of the street to the other side. And so that's one way we're using AI. And I know there's a lot of different ways that we're seeing it show up with transportation management. So I would be curious to hear with congestion management how that might look like.
I would be equally curious. I'd love to talk to you more about it because that one, I don't know, that's something new that's come across my desk at the moment. Mm-hmm. But I'd definitely be curious because you all could be potentially that test bed that could be for even the rest of the state to be, to utilize. So that's definitely something I would love to talk. I got to run off to College Station right afterwards, but if I can grab your card before I go, I would love the opportunity.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions on this particular one? Yes, sir.
Quick question on your baseline. You just conveyed to us that COVID put a stop still, for lack of a term, to what you're testing and what the parameters, and threw out a whack what was happening. So consequently, you had to do a new baseline. But the baseline that you're going to be juxtaposing 2023 to is 2021, which I would still say still has some instances that may not necessarily reflect what the actual calculations and the efforts are being done today. So if you see a large disparity, because you're getting ready, as you're saying, conducting the 2023 update, if you see that, wow, there's a completely out of whack deviation between the two right there as well, or is there an ability or a willingness to use 2023 as the baseline and say 2021, I'm chalking that up to still the residual effects of COVID?
That's an excellent question. Every year we do something, and it will be every 2 years. That in itself will be a line of note. We can use it as a baseline. One of the things we do want to look at, frankly, is that we are actually curious about, well, how have things changed from 2021 to 2023? It may not be the best representation for seeing the success of a project being implemented, but in terms of how the system has, as we like to say, got back to normal, so to speak, that's one of the things that we're definitely interested in seeing in terms of the overall reporting of system performance. Is something I do want to look at still what the difference is, but there will be asterisks.
Okay.
But to be able to look at that from 2023 to say 2025, or even 2022 to 2024, that would be appropriate too. And just because a project is complete, it doesn't mean that we can't continue to monitor it.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions?
Chair, I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
wanted us to put a pin in this type of report and hope that we can really discuss some of the results like in 2025 as we go to 26, 27, because I think this really speaks to our regional need to understand where the congestion is and what we, when someone presents us with a project, my generalist background doesn't know what we ought to do to fix that problem. And it would be so good if we were talking about the impact projects are having, if they're helping or not, so that we can help make decisions about future projects. So I really like the idea, Chair and other chairs that might come later, that we have discussions about what we're learning.
I think in response to that, I think one of the things that this document, this process needs to be considered for is identifying which, when you do, let's say, a tip call or inclusion of project into your RTP, I can show that, this road that I want to fix has experienced, a doubling of congestion over the last 5 years per this document, per these data sets. So this thing should kind of be able to highlight that. I should be able to show you in 2021 and 2023, or 2025 even, to show that, oh, look at the difference, and it'll highlight, these are the roads that are problematic. Do you have a project for those?
Well, and that's exactly why I'm bringing it up, because there's lots of, whether it's Old San Antonio on the east side of my precinct or, Bee Creek on the west side of the precinct, there are so many roads that are all of a sudden extremely congested. And I'm sure it's not all of a sudden, but to the neighbors, it feels like that. And there's so much more, intense development with a very inadequate infrastructure. And so it's just speaking to me.
Great. Thank you. Any other, yes?
I have two questions. So how, as we move forward and we're looking at this data and we have lots of major roads under construction, which is going to create congestion because of the construction to solve the congestion, how is that going to play out in the data?
Those are some of the things that we want to look at in terms of, we have a road that has a significant impact. Was there construction during the period? Because that is going to definitely impact how your road performs. Because I want to be able to, if there is a significant degradation where your average speed is usually 40 miles per hour and all of a sudden it's 20, it's like, I'm pretty sure something really, something really horrible has happened over that time, or something's getting torn up. So we want to be able to qualify it with that information. So we'll look at the history of what's gone on over the past 2 years to be able to make that determination.
Because we're going to have several major roads that have really big construction projects. in the near future or that are underway. So it's going to be a little bit of time, I think, till we can really see.
And I'm not looking forward to doing I-35 in 10 years, so.
Yeah. And then my other question is, we also have made an investment in a contract for TDM management. This may be a question for CAMPO, and I just want to, this is a study that's mandated by the state or nationally. The other study was one that we chose to do. Could you just help us understand the intersection between these?
Yes, ma'am. So as you mentioned, the CMP is a federally mandated document, and one of our recommended strategies is to implement a transportation demand management program, which we have presented to this body in the past, the various strategies that we want to implement. Just to name a few, they include school pool, large event carpool, looking at doing TDM along selected corridors that match the project readiness program that we have. So just to give you an update on the TDM program, unfortunately there isn't much to give, because despite this body approving funding to implement that program over 15 months ago, we are still waiting for the Federal Highway Administration to approve us to actually use those funds. We were told that approval should come in a week, but that was a month ago. So we're still waiting to get those funds unlocked and fully implement the program to get it going.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we will move on to the next presentation that you have for us on the Regional State of Safety Report.
Thank you again. This is an update from, I was going to say this is an update from last year's official report. I think I didn't have an opportunity to present last year's official report. So this is perhaps even an update from 2 years ago official report. And what we looked at is the past 10 years for safety in the CAMPO region, looking at the period from 2014 to 2023. Essentially, this is all from data that comes from law enforcement agencies that is submitted to TxDOT. The report provides an update on 16 different areas of safety that were released back in the original report, which I believe was conducted in 2019. We added a new item called failure to control speed. This has to do with a new, this is kind of, it's been included in TxDOT's review of crashes. While it's always been there, it's now a part of what's called speeding, even though it's not quite speeding, but we have that in there for your review as well. Next slide, please. I'm just providing an overview of the region's performance, especially from last year.
I like that. I like how you put that as a preface, because I have a quick question as soon as I saw this in our back packet. I saw that you said that state crashes went up only 0.7%.
Yes.
But then I look at 2019 and I look at 6.2, and we're already up at 6.1. So, and obviously, you know, vernacular may not be your modus operandi, but I mean, that is a little disconcerting, because it's like, wait a minute, we're getting back up to where we were previously, and you know, and if we're having that drive to zero, not good.
It's not. But you're not alone. We're all, this is a challenge for everybody. And so, and that is a good point. You know, there was kind of a hope, you know, as we look at 2020 values, how they hit a low, and actually that was, I want to say almost, you know, that was like a 15-year low, that, you know, that number. Hopefully that was perhaps the start of something good. No, that was just a low, and we're trying to get back to where we were, unfortunately. But, and as you can see from last year, you actually, you know, despite that, you passed up 2022. You're not quite at 2019 levels, but you're getting there. Next slide.
Just a quick question on the last data. that was not adjusted for population growth though, right? So if you have
Just
30.
raw numbers.
Raw numbers.
Correct.
That's raw numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Correct.
it's still better like per capita.
Yes, actually, the next slide, while we have population growth as a factor, what we like to look at is actually crash rate, which looks at the amount of travel that's conducted. And so the idea is that, how many crashes are occurring based on the amount of vehicles traveling throughout your system. And so, one of the things about this graph is that you're consistently, despite your levels, your crash rate, it's been consistently lower than the states overall. So that's a good thing for the region. However, that rate for the region continues to increase, at least since 2021, back to higher levels back earlier in this 10-year period. Next slide. I want to get into some of the performance measures that have been adopted predominantly by the state. It's also measures by the federal government that are required to be reported. The state has adopted something called Road to Zero by 2050. The idea that you will have 0 fatalities and 0 serious injuries by 2050. And so I want to go through the performance measures that are being tracked for those efforts. Big one, fatalities and fatality rates. In 2023, you had less fatalities than in the previous year, and in 2022, that was a 20-year high for this region. So you're down from that 20-year high, but you're still higher than 2021. So while you're down, you're pretty still at a very high point for this. Next slide. Similarly, in terms of serious injuries, and I like to think of serious injuries as possibly fatalities that could have happened, but they thankfully did not end up in a fatality. That's why they're also looking at those as well. These could be sometimes these are even worse than a fatality in the sense that somebody survives, and now you have somebody who is reliant on hospital care and other health care and family for the rest of their lives. It can be equally as problematic depending on the severity of that crash. So they want to reduce those as well. Down again from 2022, but still, it's close. You're still close to that high of 2022, and that's a 20-year high as well. Next slide. This slide, and forgive me for combining these, it is a combined federal performance measure. This is the measure how many bicycle and pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries are reduced. The good news is you had a considerable reduction in terms of the number of overall serious injuries and fatalities for those two categories. However, you're still operating at about 2021 levels, and it's still extremely high, even in comparison to other parts of the state. And for some reason, and something that I cannot quite understand, the level of fatalities and serious injuries have increased phenomenally throughout the state of Texas. So this is definitely a population, a mode of transportation that really needs to have additional focus in terms of future efforts.
Do you think it has to do, the chair and I were just talking about that, more people riding their bikes or, an explosion of that? Because I can see, particularly if you go on a Sunday morning or some of these back roads in particular, you see that from there. And then now that we have these bike lanes that are incorporated into our major thoroughfares, I see more people a willingness to take bikes, especially electronic bikes. And I'm assuming those are considered bicycles for your purposes as well.
Electric bikes, yes, are still considered bicycles. Bicyclists, and if you look at the side notes, bicyclists, they're a part of the issue being looked at, but not, pedestrians are much more represented in these graphs, unfortunately. I do think more bicyclists out there, it does lend to more opportunity, but the numbers are actually quite low. But the pedestrian figures are a little staggering. Looking at when and how, the concerns I see range from, people crossing in the middle of the night and they can't be seen, crossing in the wrong places. I think that it's not just, when people are crossing, but drivers were not necessarily always looking out for them. And so this is what I would call a two-party issue, whereas a lot of car crashes, it's cars crashing into cars. This is a two-party issue where drivers of cars have to be more observant and pedestrians need to be also equally observant. We need to address both sides of the issue for dealing with this. But the fact that when you hit a person, odds are your injury is going to be at least serious, if not fatal. So it's something that, we have to take extra concern and care with.
How do these numbers in the last set compare with other metro areas around the country, particularly car-centric ones like, say, San Jose or Atlanta?
I can't speak throughout the entire country. I know in Houston, I had to do some research last week, and I was actually shocked the numbers in Houston that how much it's gone up. Anecdotally, and from what I've heard from other people, that this is a problem throughout the country. I just don't have the data to support that to give you right now. But it is an increasing issue.
Looking at some of your, because this is always one of the reports I'm always fascinated by, we get every year. Even some of your own analysis, where they're building highways and building roads into retrofitting into specific areas that weren't necessarily like neighborhoods, apartment complexes that weren't necessarily built with those in mind, those engender an opportunity for people to start walking across highways and do some things where you're just like you said, you're thinking, wait a minute, no one's expecting for someone to cross over here or would think of running over there, but it's much quicker for them to do so than to wait for the bus or, walk around the entirety of the structure or something like that as well. So that might be, given y'all's own research, I think that might be a byproduct of that too, as well as us building more roads and infrastructures in places where honestly they weren't there even 10, 15 years ago.
I think the infrastructure is a big part of it. The way we develop, if I live midway between two traffic signals, two crosses, and it's a half mile this way, half mile that way, I'm going to cross the street right where I'm at. And that's, those are some of the things that we need to look at. I have concern about lighting. And while I don't know if I want to promote more light pollution during night, there's concern that adequate lighting is perhaps, whether that's available, that I can actually see the pedestrian. Because, even I, just going through my neighborhood, some of the lights are out, and I see people who, they're not even wearing, if I walked out like this, I cannot be seen at 2 in the morning. I just can't. And so, while I've had discussions with other people about the importance of that, a word that I like to throw out there, conspicuity, the ability to be seen, it's a big deal. It's really huge in the motorcycling community because they need to be seen or else they can get hit. I think it's something that needs to be promoted, especially walking at night, for your own safety, because I don't want to hit you.
And just to follow up on that, council member, what we've done a little bit of digging, and we've seen 2 trends for this issue. Is one that 90% of pedestrian deaths happen at night. The other thing that we've also seen is that over the last 10 years, the number of pedestrian deaths that have been happening on those roads that are 55 miles per hour or higher are now starting to outpace on those slower.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're not quite sure why. That definitely requires more digging, but the numbers are pretty astounding when you split when you look at the factor by the speed limit on the road itself.
And depending on the nature of that road, it's one thing if it's a Palmer, not to call it Palmer, but, being a wide road, a very fast-moving road, that's one issue. But, I don't know, to the degree it was, there was a time when people were what I'd like to call playing drunk Frogger across 35. That's something, I hope that stopped happening, but, some people do feel the need for some reason to cross the freeway in the middle of the night. I only have a couple more slides, but I mentioned the Road to Zero by 2050. This is kind of a table that kind of lays out, based on how you're performing, where about you should be, and where how the next 25 years, 26 years should look like in terms of the reduction of fatalities and serious injuries in the region. I have, the first set of figures. It's based on how we collect the data and try to determine trends. You have 2023, which pretty much is above the, levels a little higher than what historically has been out there. And so your trend down is considerable. There's a lot of work to be done. Ideally, you're cutting your these injuries and fatalities by half by 2035. That's one of the parts of the 2050 Road to Zero project, and zero by 2050. Whether that's aspirational as opposed to an actual, I don't know, but there's a lot of work to be done. Next slide. What we tried to do is to kind of, and this is just the 16 focus areas that we look at. In the original report, there were a series of focus areas essentially that we wanted people to consider as factors there, or locations or issues of note that should be looked at in terms of traffic safety. And what we did was we tried to give you an idea of how they play against each other in this table. Most of your crashes, in terms of percentage-wise, your highest amount, they're occurring at unsignalized intersections. So one of the things, like from this, we'd be looking at is, okay, what are those unsignalized intersections? Do we need to put some type of infrastructure in there to perhaps prevent crashes from occurring at them? And this is something that future efforts can look at, especially through even some of the safety planning that's being done by Will and through the Safe Streets grant that you all received. I think one of the big things about this, though, in terms of fatalities and serious injuries, while there are a lot, there are various percentages here that show how they play into the mix. 5 areas of note: alcohol, speeding, and I'm speaking about where speeds are excessive, people not wearing their seat belts, motorcyclists and pedestrians. If you look at the number of incidents that occur compared to the number of fatalities and serious injuries experienced, there's a great deal of overrepresentation in those 5 areas. And so while not necessarily, the biggest overall numbers, these are perhaps areas that should receive more focus or consideration for more focus in terms of addressing your fatality issues and serious injuries if you're really trying to hit and get those numbers down. I believe that's my last slide. If you have any other questions, I believe a report has gone out.
Sure.
Chair, I have a quick question.
Go ahead, Matt,
Yes.
and then come to you.
Thanks.
Is there a heat map or something that we could look at in terms of if there's a concentration on these unsignalized intersections with respect to, in other words, is predominantly area, road, something to that effect, that you can get a better idea about where this is occurring?
We can put that together for you.
Okay. And I guess the other thing, and this kind of goes back to the purpose of this body versus other people that are involved in traffic. When I was looking at this last night, I noticed that you had unsignalized intersections and then really distracted driving, failure to control speed. Those are more enforcement issues in my mind. I mean, unless we're going to start giving out grants to law enforcement, that's going to become, I don't even know if that falls within the purview of the body. but then you step back bound to road departures and signalized intersections. And so I guess I'm just trying to look at it from the standpoint of what recommendations or what we should focus on, and then some of these other things like young drivers, older drivers, that's a whole licensure issue in terms of whether or not, we allow them to have licenses or retain licenses after a certain point. So I guess I was struck more by, in terms of what we as a body can affect on something like this.
I think those are some extremely good points, and it kind of, I got to split that answer between the body and the members of the body. Because the body in question, yes, the predominant issues that you'll be looking at are more engineering related. What's wrong with the intersection in question? Is a road diet the right answer, to help reduce certain types of crashes? That's where this body and the projects you all submit. In terms of the members of this body, as you all are representatives of various cities and counties, the question then you get into the enforcement component of it. And those are things that you'll have to take back to your various communities and have to look at, okay, if we're going to make a dent, this body can only go so far. You all will have to go back and figure out how you can further the efforts. Because yes, ultimately, as I like to say, the biggest cause of crashes involves a component of the vehicle called the vehicle control module. If anyone doesn't know where it's located, it's between the steering wheel and the headrest.
It's the person.
And that is ultimately the problem. And until we control the behavior and how we operate our car on the roadway, that ultimately is going to have to be addressed. Enforcement, that's one of the big answers, but it's a very expensive, very intensive process.
Okay, thanks. And then Councilmember, you had a question.
I did, thank you. I
then I'll
noticed
come back
that failure to control speed and speeding were two different line items. Can
Correct.
you talk about what the difference is for those two?
Absolutely. So these are now combined by TxDOT. However, I specifically did not combine them. The reason being is that speeding refers to you're going over the speed limit or you're going too fast for conditions, meaning
Rain.
it's raining excessively, you're driving in a 45-mile-per-hour zone and you're going 45 miles per hour when you probably should be going 30, just because of the conditions. That's unsafe speed. Failure to control speed effectively means, and any cops in the room? Okay. We'd like to call that the lazy cop's answer, because what's the speed you are supposed to be going at before you hit the car? Well, the answer is 0. But you weren't going 0. If you were going 2 miles per hour and you hit the car, you failed to control your speed. That's what failure to control speed is.
Okay.
In my opinion, one of the reasons why I split it out, I'm more concerned that is a reflection of a distraction than that is a reflection of speed. TxDOT has taken this and incorporated that into speed. I'm a little concerned with that approach. It's something I hope, and this body will have to talk about, but for consideration, because I do think two issues are being combined that should not be.
Okay, thank you. And then there was a...
Appreciate that. I had one more follow-up.
Okay, go ahead.
I appreciate that explanation and also appreciate your nod to the fact that these crashes are happening because someone crashed, not because someone got hit. I think it's really important to notice that, pedestrians bumping into pedestrians, you don't see high level of fatalities, you don't see that in cycling. What happens is when someone's in a vehicle where they feel safe and they don't feel like they will be injured by their behavior, they end up taking reckless action, and it's other people who suffer. It's people that don't go home at night. That's a big concern, and I think that we need to focus on that as we get more of this information back. I'm really glad that you're going to be working on this with us. I want to see the information that's coming to us so that we can actually make good, calculated efforts to make sure that our road planning and the way that we're planning communities is helping to make sure people are safe.
And one thing in terms of TIP and other projects, safety plays a role in in the process, and so, working with CAMPO, we'll be able to pull together those statistics in terms of submitting projects, even to show that we have a problem here, or to even be able to show we have a problem here, we need to go address it. So,
Thank you. And then, Mayor, you had a question?
Yeah, just a couple questions. The first is, and maybe both these are covered in the full report, which I apologize, I haven't had a chance to read through yet, but are you tracking data around self-driving cars or kind of driver-assisted safety cars, where they'll brake when they see an object, or they'll warn you for leaving lanes? Is that data you're tracking and seeing differentiation between that and the kind of classic automobile?
so as of this time, law enforcement does not track that information. I believe once that becomes more of a standard feature, the hope is that will be tracked. A lot of times, and this is even one of those things for even distraction, it takes a lot to try to figure out whether or not someone will need to potentially break into the car's black box to determine whether or not the autopilot was on. Or even for the phone, you have to break into my phone to see whether or not I was texting or not. And so I think as that becomes much more prevalent, because it's not in a lot of vehicles just yet, but once it is, I think that data will start being collected. It's really not being collected at this time.
Okay, that's helpful to know. And then kind of building off Matt's very smart question about what can we do with this, is there data on, say, switching four-way stops to traffic circles and how that's working or not working in Texas that we can take back as we look at changes on our own road networks within our cities?
Well, that's, the traffic circle would be something where, we can look at where traffic circles have been implemented. So that would be something where if you're looking for that, say, as a solution, we are able to, because one thing that even we have access to is I have access to data throughout Texas. And so I can go find those locations that have them and see what the traffic experience has been for, locations where they installed a traffic circle and whether or not that had any impact on crashes at that location. The one thing you will find is that you might not necessarily have a reduction, or you will have a reduction, but the severity of the crash goes down because they tend to be more side swipes than smashing into the side of someone.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate both presentations. Very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time, and I apologize on behalf of Tech staff for not considering your meeting when scheduling their short course. I hope they'll be more considerate next year.
Thank you.
And now I have to go run to it.
All right, appreciate it.
Go slow.
Yeah. So that brings us down to the item number 10, and Chad is sitting in today for Ashby. Do you have anything to report for us?
No.
Okay. Nothing there. So announcements. I just want to remind you we've got a TAC meeting coming up October 21st. Our next policy board meeting is November 4th. And stay tuned. Our December meeting will not be here. It's going to be in one of the buildings in Williamson County. So don't go on autopilot and come here in December. But the staff will get out the address for that meeting. This room is being used for the December meeting. So
are we getting Christmas cookies? And
I'm working on Christmas cookies so for that. So with that, we will adjourn at 3:05. Thank you for your attendance today.
We don't know the definition of